The Casebook of Sherlock Holmes 1927, Episode 4. The Three Gables. Picture yourself at 221B Baker Street on a late autumn morning in 1902. Holmes and Watson are reviewing the morning papers when Mrs. Hudson announces an unusual visitor. "Mr. Steve Dixie to see you, Mr. Holmes. He's quite insistent and rather rough-looking." Holmes raises an eyebrow. "Show him in, Mrs. Hudson. Let's see what business brings someone whose name suggests American origins and whose description suggests criminal associations." Steve Dixie enters, a powerfully built black man with the swagger of a professional boxer and the wariness of someone accustomed to trouble. But there's also intelligence in his eyes, suggesting he's more than simple muscle. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" he asks, his accent indeed American. "I've come to give you a warning, sir. Stay away from Harrow Weald and the Three Gables. There's people there that don't want you poking around, and I've been sent to make sure you understand that. Think about this opening, detective. Someone sends an enforcer to warn off Sherlock Holmes before he's even taken a case. That means whatever's happening at the Three Gables is important enough that the criminals involved are monitoring Holmes's movements, anticipating his involvement. What kind of crime requires such proactive intimidation?" Holmes regards Dixie with amused interest rather than fear. "How fascinating. I haven't been threatened in such straightforward terms for quite some time. Tell me, Mr. Dixie, who exactly hired you to deliver this warning? And what makes them think I'm interested in the Three Gables?" Dixie shifts uncomfortably. "I don't ask questions, Mr. Holmes. I do what I'm paid to do. Consider this a friendly warning from someone who doesn't want trouble." "But you're creating trouble by coming here," Holmes points out. "You've confirmed that something worth threatening me over is happening at the Three Gables. Now, I'm definitely interested, whereas before I knew nothing about it. You've rather defeated the purpose of your errand." Watson watches this exchange with growing concern. Threatening Holmes is never wise, and this Dixie fellow seems genuinely dangerous despite Holmes's casual dismissal. Dixie's face shows frustration at being outmaneuvered verbally. "Look, Mr. Holmes, I'm just the messenger, but the people I work for, they don't play games. If you go poking around Harrow Weald, bad things might happen. I've delivered my warning. What you do with it is your business." He turns to leave, but Holmes stops him with a question. "Before you go, do you know what they're trying to hide at the Three Gables? Or are you simply following orders blindly?" The question hits a nerve. Dixie hesitates, and Watson sees genuine uncertainty cross his face. "I don't know. Details, something about a house and papers. But Mr. Holmes, the lady who hired me, Isadora Klein, she's not someone to cross. She's got money, power, connections. She can make life very difficult for people who upset her plans." He leaves before Holmes can ask more questions. After Dixie departs, Holmes immediately begins researching Isadora Klein, he muses, pulling down reference volumes. "Watson, do you know that name?" Watson racks his memory. "Klein, isn't that the wealthy widow, Spanish by birth, married to a German financier who died and left her an enormous fortune? I've seen her name in society columns. She's known for hosting political salons and supporting arts causes." "The same," Holmes confirms, finding her entry in his index of notable persons. "Isadora Klein, age 43, widow of Gerhard Klein, controls a fortune estimated at several £1,000,000. She moves in the highest social and political circles, knows cabinet ministers and foreign dignitaries, and apparently she's desperate to prevent something at the Three Gables from becoming public. What could threaten a woman with her resources? Can you sense the pattern forming? A wealthy, socially prominent woman sending criminals to threaten a detective about a house in Harrow Weald. Whatever's in that house must be extremely damaging to her reputation or interests. But what? Financial records, love letters, something even more scandalous. Holmes decides immediate investigation is warranted. They take a train to Harrow Weald, a respectable suburban area north of London. The Three Gables proves to be a substantial villa set back from the road, currently occupied by an elderly widow named Mrs. Maberley. Holmes approaches and knocks, finding Mrs. Maberley in a state of considerable distress. "Mr. Holmes, how did you know I needed help?" she exclaims. "I've been on the verge of telegraphing you. The most extraordinary things have been happening." She's a refined elderly lady, clearly genteel, but not wealthy, living in genteel poverty in this house that's too large for her needs. "Please come in, I'm at my wit's end." Mrs. Maberley explains her bizarre situation. 3 days ago, a lawyer appeared with an offer to purchase my house. The entire property, furniture, and all. He offered an extraordinarily generous price, far more than the house is worth. The only condition was that I sell everything exactly as it stands. I could take my personal clothes and necessities, but all books, papers, furniture, everything else must remain. That's certainly unusual. Holmes agrees. "Did you accept?" Mrs. Maberley nods. "I did. The money would solve all my financial problems. My late husband left debts, you see, and my son Douglas's death in Rome last year left me quite alone. The offer seemed like providence, but then strange things began happening. Think about this scenario, detective. Someone offers to buy not just a house, but its entire contents, including all papers and documents. They're not interested in the property as real estate. They're interested in something inside it. But what? And why not simply burgle the place and steal the specific item they want?" "What strange things?" Holmes prompts. Mrs. Maberley's distress increases. "The very next day, my house was burglarized, but nothing valuable was stolen, no jewelry, no silver. Instead, my son's room was ransacked. All his papers, his manuscripts, everything was thrown about as if someone was searching desperately for something specific, and they didn't find it, because the next night, it happened again." "Your son was a writer?" Holmes asks, his interest sharpening. "What kind of manuscripts did he produce?" Mrs. Maberley's face softens with maternal pride. "Douglas was a novelist. Not commercially successful, I'm afraid, but he had talent. He was working on a novel when he died. A roman à éclat, he called it. A novel based on real people and events, but with names changed. He said it would make his reputation if it was ever published." Can you see where this is leading? A novelist dies, leaving behind a manuscript that's a thinly disguised account of real events involving real people. Someone very wealthy and very powerful is desperate to obtain that manuscript before it can be published. The house purchase offer was simply a way to legally acquire everything, ensuring the manuscript couldn't surface. But Mrs. Maberley apparently still has it somewhere. "Do you still have this manuscript?" Holmes asks urgently. "Where is it?" Mrs. Maberley looks confused. "Why, it's in Douglas's room, hidden in a secret drawer in his desk. I haven't moved it since his death. It's too painful to read." "Why do you ask?" Holmes realizes with alarm. "Mrs. Maberley, the burglars will return. They're searching systematically. Eventually, they'll find that secret drawer. We need to secure that manuscript immediately, but they're too late." Even as Holmes speaks, they hear sounds from upstairs. Someone is in the house right now, continuing the search. Holmes and Watson rush upstairs to find a rough-looking man rifling through Douglas Maberley's desk. The man sees them and tries to flee, but Watson, his military reflexes still sharp, tackles him efficiently. "Well done, Watson," Holmes exclaims, helping to restrain the burglar. "Now, my friend, you're going to tell us who hired you and what you're searching for." The man, a professional criminal named Barney Stockdale, initially refuses, but Holmes's methods of persuasion, involving threats of police prosecution versus cooperation, eventually loosen his tongue. All right, Stockdale admits. "I was hired by a lady, never met her directly, worked through intermediaries. I was told to search this house for a manuscript written by the dead son, had to find it before the old lady could sell it or show it to anyone. That's all I know." Holmes presses. "Who hired you? Give me a name." Stockdale shakes his head. "Only know her as the Spanish lady. But word on the street is she's rich, powerful, and doesn't like being crossed. The Spanish lady, Isadora Klein, of course." Holmes now has confirmation of her involvement. He secures the manuscript from its hiding place, a cunningly concealed drawer that even the burglars missed, and begins reading it while Watson guards Stockdale. Mrs. Maberley watches anxiously. What does it say? Why is it so important? As Holmes reads, his expression shifts from curiosity to understanding to something like sympathy. "Mrs. Maberley," he finally says, "your son wrote about a love affair between a young man and an older married woman of wealth and social position. The woman's husband was elderly and infirm. The novel strongly suggests, without quite stating directly, that the husband's death may not have been entirely natural. It's a scandalous story that would destroy the woman's reputation if published with even a thin veil of fictional names. Think about the implications. Douglas Maberley had an affair with Isadora Klein. The manuscript makes her identity unmistakable to anyone who knows society. He wrote about it, including suggestions that she may have hastened her elderly husband's death to be free to continue the affair. When Douglas died in Rome, supposedly of pneumonia, Isadora thought the secret died with him. Then she learned about his manuscript. How did your son die?" "Mrs. Maberley?" Holmes asks gently. "The exact circumstances, if you know them." She dabs at her eyes. "He traveled to Rome for his health and literary research. He wrote saying he'd met a wonderful woman who understood his artistic soul. Then I received a telegram that he died of pneumonia. His body was sent home for burial. I never learned who the woman was. He'd never mentioned her name in his letters." Holmes and Watson exchange meaningful looks. Douglas met a woman in Rome who understood him, then died suddenly. The manuscript suggests Isadora Klein was capable of eliminating her own husband. Would she hesitate to eliminate a young lover who'd become a liability by writing about their affair? "Mrs. Maberley," Holmes says carefully, "I believe your son's death may not have been natural, but proving it now after a year would be impossible. Can you see the full scope of the crime?" Isadora Klein had an affair with a young novelist. He wrote about it. She may have killed him to silence him, but didn't know about the manuscript. When she discovered its existence, she tried to buy the house and all its contents to secure it legally. When that process was too slow, she hired criminals to steal it. And she sent Steve Dixie to threaten Holmes to prevent investigation. It's a web of crimes spanning continents and years. Holmes makes a decision. "Mrs. Maberley, I'm going to confront Isadora Klein directly. I'll offer her a choice. Purchase this manuscript legitimately at a fair price, compensating you for your silence, or face exposure of the entire affair, including my suspicions about your son's death. Would you accept such an arrangement?" Mrs. Maberley considers. "If she killed my Douglas, shouldn't she face justice?" "She should," Holmes agrees. "But proving murder in a foreign country after a year, is nearly impossible. We have a scandalous manuscript, suspicious circumstances, but no hard evidence of poisoning or foul play. The Italian authorities accepted the death as natural pneumonia. Reopening the case would cause enormous scandal, destroy your son's reputation along with hers, and likely result in no conviction. Sometimes pragmatic justice must suffice. Think about this moral choice, detective. Pursue potentially unprovable murder charges that would scandalize everyone involved, or accept financial compensation and silence. Holmes is offering the practical solution, but is it the just one, or is he allowing a probable murderer to buy her way out of consequences? Holmes travels to Isadora Klein's London mansion, a palatial residence that demonstrates her immense wealth. She receives him in a drawing room, decorated with priceless art and furniture. Herself dressed in the height of fashion, a striking woman in her 40s, beautiful, sophisticated, and radiating the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what she wants through money and social position. "Mr. Holmes," she greets him coolly, "I wondered when you might call. I assume Mr. Dixie's warning was ineffective?" Holmes smiles. "Quite the opposite. It guaranteed my interest. Mrs. Klein, I have Douglas Maberley's manuscript. I've read it. I understand why you're desperate to obtain it. Shall we discuss terms?" Isadora's facade cracks slightly, revealing desperation beneath the polish. "What do you want?" "Money, I have plenty. Name your price." But Holmes shakes his head. "Not my price, Mrs. Maberley's. She's the rightful owner of her son's work. You'll purchase the manuscript from her for £5,000, enough to support her comfortably for life. In exchange, the manuscript will be destroyed and no copies will exist." "5,000!" Isadora exclaims. "That's extortion!" Holmes's voice hardens. "No, Mrs. Klein, it's compensation. Compensation for a son whose death I strongly suspect wasn't natural. Compensation for the terror you've inflicted on an elderly widow through your hired criminals. Compensation for the emotional damage your affair caused a young man who thought himself loved when he was merely being used." Can you see Holmes's strategy? He's not threatening criminal prosecution. He knows that's unlikely to succeed. Instead, he's leveraging her social position. "Consider the alternative," Holmes continues. "I take this manuscript to publishers. It becomes a sensation. Your affair is exposed. Questions are raised about your husband's death and Douglas's death. You may not face criminal charges, but your social position will be destroyed. Ministers will no longer attend your salons. Your political influence will evaporate. Is that worth £5,000 to prevent?" Isadora Klein's face shows the calculation of a trapped predator looking for escape. Finally, she concedes. "Very well, £5,000 to Mrs. Maberley, and the manuscript is destroyed?" Holmes nods. "Burned in my presence, so you can witness its destruction. But I want something else. A full confession, written and sealed, to be opened only if you ever trouble Mrs. Maberley again." "Insurance, you understand. You want me to confess to murder?" she asks, aghast. Holmes's expression is cold. "I want you to confess to the affair and to your suspicions about Douglas's death, enough to destroy you socially if it became public, but not enough to constitute legal evidence of murder. It will remain sealed unless you force me to use it. Consider it motivation to live an honest life going forward." Isadora writes the confession with a shaking hand, admitting the affair, admitting her husband's death was convenient, admitting Douglas became inconvenient when he wrote about their relationship. She doesn't quite admit to murder, but the implications are clear. Holmes takes the document, witnesses the manuscript's burning, and accepts a bank draft for £5,000 payable to Mrs. Maberley. So tell me, detective, is this justice? A probable double murderer pays money and writes a confession that will never be used, then walks free to continue her privileged life. she loses nothing except money, which she has in abundance, and gains assurance that her secrets remain buried. Is Holmes complicit in letting a murderer escape, or is he being pragmatic about the limits of provable evidence? Watson raises these concerns as they return to Harrow Weald. Holmes, we've just let a murderer buy her freedom. Shouldn't we at least try to build a case against her? Holmes's response is weary. With what evidence, Watson? A year-old death in Italy attributed to pneumonia, a manuscript that's now ashes, circumstantial suspicions that any good lawyer would demolish in minutes. We'd accomplish nothing except destroying Mrs. Maberley's peace and Douglas's posthumous reputation. But justice, Watson begins. Holmes cuts him off. Justice, Watson, is sometimes about choosing the least bad option. Mrs. Maberley gets financial security. Isadora Klein's secrets are contained but can be exposed if she threatens anyone again. Douglas's scandalous manuscript is destroyed rather than becoming tabloid fodder. No perfect solution exists, but this outcome serves more people than criminal prosecution that would likely fail. They deliver the bank draft to Mrs. Maberley, who weeps with relief and gratitude. Mr. Holmes, you've saved me from ruin. I can now live comfortably, perhaps even help Douglas's literary friends who remain poor. Thank you. She never learns the full truth about her son's death. Holmes judges that ignorance is kindness in this case. Steve Dixie also receives a visit from Holmes. Mr. Dixie, I know you are hired by Isadora Klein to threaten me. I'm not pressing charges, but I want you to understand something. You work for a woman who may have committed murder to protect her secrets. If she hired you once for intimidation, she might hire you again for worse. Consider carefully who you work for. Dixie's face shows he's already had similar thoughts. The case closes with Barney Stockdale prosecuted for burglary. He serves 6 months. Steve Dixie finding more legitimate employment as a boxing trainer, and Isadora Klein continuing her social prominence, but reportedly becoming more charitable and less ruthless in her dealings. Perhaps the sealed confession serves as conscience as well as threat.